Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leanne Brammer. I'm the coordinator at the West Virginia Department of Education for Speech Language Impaired, AIM, Assistive Technology, and OTPT. I want to welcome you to the session this afternoon on 3-to-1 service delivery model for related service providers. We are recording, so just be aware of that. I'd like to ask you to please make sure your microphone's muted and that you turn your camera off. We don't want to have anything on the recording of you eating lunch or that kind of thing, or pick up phone conversations that you're having that are private. So please make sure that those adjustments have been made. And also remember that closed captioning is available if you require it, and it's located on the toolbar. You can ask questions by putting them in the chat box. Libby's monitoring those questions for me. And when we get finished at the end, we'll go back through after we've covered all the information and answer any remaining questions that you have. And you can unmute your microphone to answer those questions, ask those questions at the time if you'd like. Here's one more reminder that you can take these sessions for non-degree graduate credit or for certificate renewal at this website, this URL. And if you don't have it already and you need it, you can just snap a picture with your camera. Just a quick financial disclosure. I don't have any relevant financial relationships to disclose except for the West Virginia Department of Education Employment. And I did want to mention that we received approval from the West Virginia Board of Examiners for speech language pathology and audiology for this session, and we did apply for the physical therapy board approval. By the time we finish today, I hope you'll understand at least 5 positive effects of using the 3-to-1 scheduling model, and also be able to name some of the activities, at least 5, that you can do during that indirect week of therapy that you're possibly not doing now. In 2014, all 3 organizations, APTA, AOTA, and ASHA, all agreed that a workload paradigm shift was needed in educational settings. And that's the reason we've invited all related service providers to this session. Why is it important to discuss the 3-to-1 scheduling model? With our jobs, flexibility is always important. But now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are being called on to be even more flexible than usual. That is actually the most flexible diagram I could find, because I know I couldn't do that if my life depended on it. So just know that we are going to have to be flexible. We always have to be flexible, but now it's going to require even more flexibility. For those of you who haven't checked out the Department of Education website, there is a toolkit on there, and this is the link. The link is posted here for you to be able to go on there and look at the reentry toolkit. There's really good information on there that I think you need to check out, and it explains the different reentry options. Because of all the terminology associated with this pandemic, and I hear somebody's mic's unmuted. If you could please mute. Thank you.
I'm looking and I'm not finding anyone who's not muted, but also people are saying you're fading in and out.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for letting me know that. And I am going to try to switch over to my phone as a hotspot, because I'm guessing that's maybe the issue here. So.
And Darlene is saying that her PowerPoint is not changing. I'm not sure why that's the case, Darlene.
I'm not either. You might want to go out and come back in. That might take care of it. But can everyone else see that it's changing? Libby, is it changing for you?
It is.
Okay. All right. Bear with me 1 second as I set this up as a hotspot. So
Jackie says that it's lagging for her, but she's getting it. That's probably the speed, right? The internet
I'm
speed.
guessing. So let's see if that makes a difference. Okay.
And then Andrea says it's slow.
Okay. I apologize for that. I was hoping that everything was going to be okay.
And Deborah says she's not seeing a PowerPoint slide.
Okay, well, as soon as we get this switched over, we'll see if that takes care of all these issues.
The reentry models, Taylor, is correct. That's the slide she's on right now.
Okay, are we back?
Some are getting it. Melinda doesn't see it either. Some are working fine. For those that's not working, it might be a good idea to go out and come back in.
Okay, and Libby, please stop me if my voice is going in and out, if you're seeing comments like that, okay?
Okay, because I didn't know whether to interrupt, but I will do that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'd much rather you interrupt and make sure everybody hears everything. So that's all right. We can edit this a little bit if we need to, I guess. So I apologize for that. I'm at my mom's house. I've been quarantined with her, and her connectivity is not as good as mine at my house. So my brother's at my house, and I really can't go over there because he works at Kroger. So anyway, more than you needed to know. So as we were talking about the toolkit, there's a lot of really good information in the toolkit. And with that, there are different scenarios that are listed as far as reentry. Every county is going to select the reentry process that they want to use. So you definitely need to look at your reentry information from your county. But as far as the two options are concerned, there's probably going to be a little bit of confusion about the terminology remote learning, because we did have remote learning plans or distance learning plans last spring. I hear somebody's phone still isn't muted. I can hear a child maybe in the background, if that helps any. So
someone says you are still fading in and out, and I don't see a mic on, so it must be somebody on their phone. So
okay.
if you would please turn it off.
Okay, I increased my volume, and I'm just going to have to go ahead. And if you're fading in and out, if I'm fading in and out on your end, I apologize for that. But I've made all the corrections I can do at this point. This recording will be available, and so you will have access to the information later, and I apologize. With remote learning, that only happens now when the governor declares it. A school or a county can't declare remote learning. And remote learning means that it's just a temporary issue, and it's not going to be long lasting. But when you talk about in-person and blended instruction, that instruction is going to be determined by your counties. And with that determination, there may be, all 5 days a week that they are in school, maybe 2 days a week, whatever it is. Those other days that they are not in school, learning will continue at home. And then the virtual learning, that's where it's going to be definitely different than it was last spring. We were trying to do a good faith effort last spring as far as providing services, but this time each county has to offer a full-time virtual learning option for students, because some parents are going to be concerned about bringing their students back to school and that kind of thing. So that has to be offered, and there's more information on the website, but in the case of remote learning, there will be some remote learning plans that we put in place for just when the governor calls those states of emergency again. With the in-person and blended instruction and with virtual learning, our services should continue as they are anyway. So one thing that we need to consider, though, is with the in-person learning, if students are only in school maybe 2 days a week, there will be times that teachers will not want them to be pulled out for services. So that's where we're going to have to get creative and be flexible to be able to provide those services when that situation happens. So that's the reason we're talking about the 3-to-1 model, because it is important for us to be able to schedule and have flexibility with scheduling. We're all used to the ways we've scheduled in the past. And the way we've scheduled in the past has probably been a traditional schedule. Every 30-minute time block is filled with a student's name or a group of students' names, and we're scheduled back to back all day long with maybe time for lunch and maybe half an hour for planning. Or, you know, some counties allow like Friday afternoons to be able to get things done, because a lot of times it's so difficult to get anything done with just a half an hour a day. But whatever we're looking at is going to be have the potential to be crazy, but I'm hoping that with these suggestions on the 3-to-1 model and just trying to think outside the box and think creatively, it won't be as bad as it seems. There's little evidence that says that scheduling a student for 2 half-hour sessions weekly promotes a student's ability to acquire and generalize speech or language skills. Now, OTs and PTs, if you're on this call, please understand that a lot of the research that I found was related to speech and language, but you know, this information could easily apply to you as well. Yet that's, even though there's little research to support that type of scheduling, it happens all the time. That's what we traditionally put on IEPs. And we've kind of gotten into a habit of doing that and not particularly looking at the individual needs of the student, but looking at our schedule and how that student will fit into it. In a systematic review of research, Flynn and others in ASHA Leader found that going into the classroom is at least as effective, if not more effective, than doing the pullout. Well, let me see here. Okay. So, evidence-based research says that there is research on the effects of collaborative services, and it's important to plan with teachers in order for that to be effective. And that's what the 3-to-1 model will allow you to do. How is the 3-to-1 model, scheduling model, different from traditional scheduling? I just described traditional scheduling. It's where we schedule students every week for the same amount of time, and we have them back to back all day long. With a 3-to-1 model, and I put compliance and flexible scheduling model in there as well, because some counties have found that, you know, approaching their special ed director or principals and that kind of thing, if they mentioned it, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why this is happening. For approaching them, calling it the compliance model or the flexible scheduling model made them accept the idea more. With the 3-to-1 model, the provider gives 3 weeks of direct services and 1 week of indirect. The focus of the direct weeks is on learning new skills, and the focus on the second week is monitoring the stabilization of the skills. Oops. What is it? What is it really? It's a cyclical schedule. And you have 3 weeks in a row where you conduct the direct services, and it's followed by an indirect week of services with activities that are related to the student, but you don't work with the student directly during those times. The IEP reflects the services this way: direct services so many times, 3 times per month, and in indirect services 1 time per month. When we've done this training in the past, some counties have chosen not to do the indirect services on the IEP. Our guidance is to do it, because if you don't have those services on the IEP, you don't have the justification that you need to be able to go in and work and collaborate with teachers or other service providers. You also don't have a way to document your services that you've been doing to be able to show parents, this is what I've done for your child during this indirect week, because when you explain this to parents, they're going to have a question about what you're going to be doing that 4th week. And we'll talk about the things you can do. But I think it's really important to have that indirect service on the IEP. And that's accountability for you, but it also shows your principal, your special ed director, that you are providing services to the student that week. You're just not pulling the student to do it. I'm going to switch off the way I'm sharing this screen. I apologize for this, but I think that's going to make it easier with us not having the screen advance so quickly. I apologize for all these technical things we practiced, and no matter how much you practice, there are always issues. In some cases, the indirect activity days are spread throughout the month, because there are some people who are concerned about having a whole week where they don't have services, where they're not seeing students directly. And so with that, you can also just plan like every Friday or certain days of the week that you'll take off to do that, you'll schedule as indirect days. And then that way it's interspersed, and it really kind of comes in handy too if you need to do some makeup therapy or do some evaluations or IEP meetings. You can schedule them on those indirect days that are interspersed throughout your month. Increase this a little bit. Oops. Okay. The 3-to-1 model provides a therapist with a distinct structure to formally discuss students' needs, progress, and strategies needed for success that can consistently be documented on a regular basis. The primary goal of 3-to-1 is to align the goals and objectives with the curriculum for better generalization of skills in the educational setting. And the secondary, it allows a means to schedule indirect service time, which traditional schedules do not. I know whenever we talk about trying to collaborate with the teacher and with the OT and PT or with another service provider, the special education teacher, everyone's first response is, I don't have time in my schedule. Well, you don't if you're doing a traditional schedule and you're scheduled back to back. But this gives you the opportunity to allow time to do that. And since research shows that collaboration is an important piece, and the evidence shows that, it's an important piece to make sure we do. It also provides extra time for makeup therapy, which results in more compliant IEP service delivery. Our workload includes a lot of activities. Some of them are indirect, like doing programming for AAC devices or preparing home packets and that kind of thing, but they're directly related to that student. We also have direct services to students, which includes instruction, intervention, and evaluation. When we're doing all of those things, we don't have time to do the indirect things like collaboration and preparation of materials. And we also have to do activities that support the students' overall education program and compliance with federal, state, and local mandates that result from membership of a community of educators. When we look at the indirect week activities, we kind of came up with a color coding system, and this is like a cheat sheet on how you can determine which activities you're doing that week.
Leanne, people are not seeing your slides. They're not advancing.
Are you seeing them advance?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Then I think it must be a connectivity issue maybe on their end. I'm not positive, but as long as the record, I'm sorry?
I see them fine.
Okay. Well, I think it's a connectivity issue on the people's end who are having difficulty. If they want to go out and come in again, that's fine. Or if they want to just watch the recording, that's fine too. You know, this is where flexibility comes into play too. You know, I know there are connectivity issues all over the state, and that might be one of the reasons. So we're going to forge ahead and just realize that the PowerPoint will be available for you as well as the video. So if you're not seeing the screen now, you can listen to what I'm saying, and you'll receive those things afterward. Okay, when we're looking at this indirect week, there are different things we can do during this week. But if you look at some of these things, these are things you probably haven't had time to do most of the time if you're doing a traditional schedule. Makeup therapy is one thing that's very important, and this allows time for you to do that. One thing I would caution you about doing though is it seems like when we've done these done this training in the past, and counties have reported back to us about how how things are going, they're saying that they're not always getting to do all of the indirect activities, especially the collaboration with the teachers, because they're having to do so much makeup therapy and that kind of thing. Well, just remember that if the student is absent, that doesn't have to be made up unless there's been a lot of absence. Then that's a different situation. And just remember that if you're absent or if you had to cancel for some reason, then that should be made up if at all possible. So you shouldn't be using that fourth week for all makeup therapy. That shouldn't be happening. And if you're having to do that, then you maybe need to look at a different week that you schedule in the month to do it. You can do observations that week, like down where it says evaluations and screening. You can do your classroom observations that week, initial evaluations, re-evals. You can do testing, dynamic assessments, just information gathering. That can all be indirect service that you're providing. You can attend PLC meetings with teachers and do parent consultations during that week. It'll be so, for some parents who are willing to participate and want to know what they can do at home, it's wonderful for you to be able to do a consultation with them, even if it's virtual, to tell them how they can continue to help their student at home, their child at home. And you can also do consultations with, the teachers and other service providers. Trying to make your planning so that you can attend a PLC meeting at least once a month is really beneficial, because you can get that grade level curriculum information from all the teachers at one time. So that's something to consider. If you're going to be doing programs like the STEPS program, as far as a prevention activity, which we are responsible for doing, you can schedule your STEPS students, either direct or indirect services during that week. The skill program for those SLPs who use it, or the Story Champs, that's a good time to do that as well. There are other activities that we have to do, like IEP meetings and SATs and eligibility meetings and 504. If at all possible, you could schedule those meetings during those times so you're not canceling therapy to be able to do those meetings. As far as IDEA support that's needed, we do have to write IEPs and eligibility committee reports and child outcome summaries, progress reports, and program devices, because it's on the student's IEP. So all of those things are important and can be done those indirect weeks. Medicaid paperwork. Everyone knows who does Medicaid billing that it's time consuming and that it's very it's something that's hard to do if you're trying to do it one day a month, which a lot of people report that they do. They just have to dedicate one day a month to do Medicaid billing. And with that means they're having to cancel therapy at some point to do that. So having the ability to do that during that indirect week is very helpful. I did want to mention, just as an aside too, that we are exploring the idea of doing electronic documentation, and we'll continue to explore that and hopefully be able to offer that at some point in the future. One of the things that the literature talks about all the time, especially if you're an SLP, is interprofessional practice activities. And that's just basically saying that it's important for you to be able to collaborate with other professionals and with the families and caregivers to deliver the highest quality of service that you can provide to the student. And that's one thing that I never am concerned about when I'm talking to groups about speech language pathologists. I know that you guys are doing the very best you possibly can to provide the best services possible to every one of your students. And I'm sure it's just the same with OTs and PTs, at least for the ones I know, for sure it is. And I'm sure it is for everyone else too. So being able to perform these professional collaborative activities is extremely important. And in a large study, Pfeiffer found that SLPs usually collaborated with the teachers at IEP meetings or with the other service providers. And if you only collaborate once a year with the teacher and the other service providers, then you're not getting that collaborative information for the generalization that you need for those skills for the student in the classroom. SLPs are more likely to use IPP if they were taught that in school. And they reported that part of the issue was a lack of time, buy-in from other professionals, and administrative support. But now with the event of the COVID epidemic, we are really in a situation where you might be collaborating with teachers online. You might be collaborating with them in a, virtually some way. You might be able to collaborate with them in a classroom following the CDC rules and the social distancing rules. But there are going to be different ways you're going to be able to, to be able to have that collaboration. And that's another way we need to be flexible. You may be seeing some of your students online, some face-to-face. It's just going to be a different ballgame this year, and being able to have the flexibility to do that scheduling and meet all of your students' needs is going to be very important. There are a lot of benefits of being able to collaborate with others. Generalization for sure. If you're going into a therapy room and taking a student in there and you never see the classroom teacher, you never talk to them about what's going on in the classroom with the student, and they don't know what you're working on because you're working on isolated skills with the student, then that generalization is sometimes difficult to achieve. I can remember when I was working in Kanawha County, there'd be times I would have to dismiss students because they had, progressed as much as I felt like they could in therapy with me, but they really hadn't generalized everything over to all environments at that point. So there wasn't time because I was scheduled back to back to meet with teachers and talk about how the students were doing, or other service providers, and, figure out how we can all be on the same page for these students. And that's so important. It allows for more consistent progress over time, and numerous opportunities for the SLP or the OT or the PT to train the staff on differentiated instruction and different ways they can help support the student in the classroom based on what you're doing to support them on the IEP. They can learn to use a variety of learning modalities. We can add to the teacher's resource library. There are just all kinds of things that can be a positive because of using interprofessional collaboration. The student's needs dictate the services that we provide. So just bearing in mind for SLPs, and OTs and PTs have been doing this for a while, considering the educational relevance. So just remember that the services you provide need to be related to their curriculum and what they're doing in the classroom, and using the least restrictive environment and natural learning environment to do it. The Indirect Services Week, according to people who have used it in the past or using it now, for those of you who are SLPs and Jenna Rayburn-Kirk from the Speech Room News, she says that's absolutely the busiest week of her month. And it's your chance to see students in their learning environments. You can go in and observe in the classrooms, and you can give feedback and ideas to the classroom teachers on how to support those students in the classroom. You can adjust your speech and language program better to meet the needs of the students if you've gone in the classroom and they're seeing what they're doing. It's a student's chance to see you outside the classroom and understand that they need to use their good speech everywhere, not just in the therapy room with you. And it helps them know that you're watching. And it would be the same thing for OTs and PTs. It allows for collaboration and consultative time with other speech pathologists, teachers, and service providers. And you can develop home programs and track progress. All kinds of great things can be done that you don't have time to do now during that Indirect Services Week. There are benefits to the model too. Makeup therapy is easier to schedule, so IEPs are more compliant. We mentioned that earlier. Scheduling IEPs during that week means a lot less cancellation of therapy. It allows time for collaboration and planning with the teacher, and frees up time to do everything that's required of us that we haven't been able to do before. Now, does this model work? Schroeder collected information from SLPs all over the country, and they reported it was an improved quality of services because they were knowledgeable about what was going on in the classroom. The classroom teacher was not knowledgeable what the SLP was working on. There were fewer SLP vacancies because honestly, it's so frustrating to know that you need to do home programs or you need to make activities for students or make OGCOM low-tech boards or program devices, and you just don't have time in your day to do it because you're scheduled back-to-back providing that face-to-face therapy. And just remember too that the research doesn't really support that providing all that face-to-face therapy makes as much difference as it does the collaboration piece. So there's reduced litigation because IEPs are being met. There's increased opportunity for collaboration, a significant reduction of the SLP taking work home, and fewer direct service cancellations because the therapist knows they're going to have time during that indirect week or during the indirect days that they've designated throughout the month to be able to do paperwork and that kind of thing and testing. And there's an increased ability to integrate the IEP goals into the classroom curriculum. Now, why should you show your indirect time when you're using the 3-to-1 scheduling model? I've already talked about a couple of reasons, but it proves to the parents that you're doing the indirect services. If it's on the IEP, they know it has to be done. It provides a way to document the services you're providing. It proves to the principal and other staff that you do have activities that week and you're not taking the week off. And it allows important time necessary to collaborate with teachers and other related service providers. There were only 2 cons that we could kind of come up with, and one was that documentation is required. The amount of documentation isn't as much as it is for a direct service provision, with all the requirements for Medicaid and all that as far as our lesson plans are concerned. But with this, you just have to document that you programmed a device for that student or that you worked on a home program or that you observed in their classroom. Those are the types of that's the type of documentation you need, and that could be kept in your therapy logs that you keep. And the service must be provided. So, people will say that they don't want to be locked in to be able to having to provide that indirect service that week, but you really kind of need to be because that's what gets you in the classroom and lets the principal know, yes, I do see this indirect time on your schedule, so we do need to allow time for you to do that. And just remember too, you're not going to have the same amount of indirect time that you would direct time. So just because a student gets a half an hour a day, 2 times a week for therapy, doesn't mean they have to have a half hour of indirect time. If you think about the individual student and the things you have to do for them indirectly, your indirect time can vary for each one. A student who has autism, for instance, might take a lot more indirect time as far as observing in the classroom, programming a device, making activities for them to do in the classroom, those kinds of things, than a student who has articulation errors. So that can be variable. You can set those indirect times based on the student's needs. Classroom carryover is promoted in 2 ways by using this model. And SLP can be in the classroom targeting carryover and generalization on any of the areas that we provide services on. And they collaborate with a teacher to develop supports for each student in the classroom to increase carryover and generalization of skills. So while we're finding out the curriculum supports that are needed for our students, they could also be used with other students in the classroom. So that provides such a good opportunity to show what we can bring to the table. A traditional schedule just does not allow you to do that. This is just an example of how you would write the services on the IEP. And you can see that I did put indirect times on here. I did leave them, 30 minutes for the indirect times, but they certainly don't have to be that way. And later on, I used an example where we just had 20 minutes of indirect time a month. Ideas for making it work. If you begin to use the 3-to-1 model, develop a schedule right at the beginning of the year. Have that indirect week, have a calendar for it, or some type of schedule that you can fill in the blanks. And we're going to go over some examples in just a minute so that you know right from the beginning what you're going to be doing. What a lot of people tend to do, we found out as we were doing a pilot study in Kanawha County, is they tended to wait until that indirect week was there and then decide what they were going to do that week. Well, sometimes by doing that, that didn't leave time for them to schedule that observation in the classroom that needed to take place, or that collaboration with the PLC. What they ended up doing a lot of times was, scheduling their evaluations then, doing screenings, doing all that kind of thing, which is fine because you can do that that week. But meeting the needs of those students needs to come first that week because it's on their IEP for one. So just remember to, make sure you're using the model correctly. You can take a broader view of allocating your time, like multiple students at one time. And please understand too, this is just an overview of the 3-to-1 scheduling model. When we do this training, typically it's a whole day. At least the initial training is, and we have activities for you to do. We have you look at your current caseloads and determine, which kids could come off the caseload and that kind of thing because they're not really educationally relevant IEPs and that kind of thing. So this is just an overview to let you know about the model. We have developed a 3-to-1 fact sheet that you can give to parents and principals and that kind of thing. I'm going to be doing some short webinars and make them available to special ed directors. They've heard about this model before, but we're going to talk about it more specifically related to the flexibility that you're going to need because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that will be available to them as well. So I just really think that this is going to be an important model to consider. It's not going to meet the needs of every student, but I think it's going to be really helpful if you can at least get an overview of it today. There will be resources at the end of this that you can look through, and we're happy to not come anymore. We're happy to provide any virtual support we can or any virtual trainings you might need. An important thing to do to make this work is to be visible in those classrooms. If you tell the classroom teachers that you need to be in to observe those students during that indirect week, then you need to make sure you're in there. It doesn't mean you have to be in there for a set amount of time, as long as you're doing other indirect activities for that student that week. But, make sure that you have let them know, first of all, that you're coming ahead of time. And a lot of times, if you can schedule like a preschool block of time that you'll do observations, then those preschool teachers know to expect you, within that half-hour period. Same thing for first grade, other grades. That's just one way to try to schedule it so you can make sure that you're seeing your students. And when you're doing those observations, hopefully you can see more than one student in that classroom that's on your caseload. Students can understand coach week a lot better than indirect week. So that's just one suggestion that one of the articles said that we could call it that week, so they're not surprised when they see you in their classroom observing. And it's a way to transition to more in-class service provision or prevention. So, we may have to be going into classrooms more than we have traditionally done in the past because of the way the classrooms will be set up in pods and that kind of thing, potentially. So that's just another thing to consider. If they get used to seeing us in the classroom, they know that when we're in there, we can give them some good suggestions on what to do with those students. That acceptance will become greater, and we can work more on providing some of our services in the classroom. In order to get your colleagues involved, there are all kinds of things that were suggested. I watched a webinar the other day that suggested you have a donut hour where you invite teachers to come into your therapy room or wherever you are and have donut holes or something like that for them, and have your schedule posted on the wall so they can, sign up for times, determine the times that they would like for you to be in their classrooms or when it would be a good time to meet with them. Definitely don't just drop in on a teacher and tell them that you need to speak to them about a student. You guys, if you've done that in the past, you know how well that works. Their time is just as precious as ours. And, during their planning time, a lot of times they only have that half hour that day or however, 45 minutes that day. And they have a lot of things to get accomplished during that time too. So make sure you've made arrangements with them up front to do that. Transparency is crucial, particularly as you're just getting started, to make sure you have a schedule that you can post. And the suggestion is to post it out, on your door, and just make sure you don't have students' names posted. But we're going to get into it in just a second. During that indirect week, you're typically not going to have students' names on there anyway. Just call it what it is when you're explaining to teachers how it's going to work, and when you're explaining to families and principals. Just tell them that's your week or your time or your couple of days interspersed throughout the month that you're going to do the collaborative and indirect services that need to be done to make their child successful and to get that generalization to happen, in that it is evidence-based, that it does work. So just make sure and explain it to them. Have a schedule and stick to it. To change your schedule all the time kind of lets them see that maybe it's not as crucial as you said it was, if you're constantly having to change your schedule because you're doing makeup therapy or something like that. And we'll look in just a minute how you can block out time for those makeup therapy sessions and testing and that kind of thing. But try to keep on schedule and don't allow others to interrupt what you're trying to do, especially your classroom observations and that kind of thing. The other things are more flexible, but the classroom observations, kind of need to stay on a schedule. There are going to be times when you have to cancel due to illness, or you've got a conference or an IEP meeting that you couldn't get rearranged. But for the most part, try to stick to that schedule. Is the 3-to-1 compliance scheduling model appropriate for all students? Simple answer is no, it's not. And I wanted to take some time to brainstorm some of the reasons why it's not. But because of the technical issues, I'm afraid we're going to run out of time, and I want to be sure to allow you time to do your survey at the end. So I'm just going to tell you some of the things that have come out in brainstorms sessions that we've had before. One of the things is for students with autism. We all know how routine they are, how they are schedule oriented. And if their schedule changes for some reason, sometimes that's upsetting to them. We're also going to have some students that absolutely need that fourth week of sessions if they're have a severe phonological process disorder or some other issue that makes it difficult for them to be able to go without that week of direct services. So you're going to have to look at each one of these students on an individual basis, but be sure and base it on what the student needs and not just your personal feeling that if I don't provide that fourth week, I'm not providing the service that they need. If I don't provide that direct service, my kids need all direct services. Well, I'm sure that's, going to be a hard feeling to get past, but just remember what the research shows. And the research shows that they need these indirect activities as well to make that progress happen. So when you're thinking about direct and indirect, your direct services can be evaluations that you're doing, identifying students with speech language impairment, providing direct instruction and intervention, and direct services within the MTSS model, like RTI or STEPS, and reevaluating students to determine whether or not continued services are needed. Those are all direct services that we provide to students. Now, when you think about indirect, we have to analyze the demands and the requirements of the curriculum and how it affects our individual students, contribute to the development of IEPs and IFSPs and 504 plans, monitor implementation of the IEP modifications. So if we have a modification that a student needs to be using their device, for instance, to respond to questions in class because they're nonverbal, then we need to make sure and monitor that augmentative communication devices being offered in class, those kinds of things. We have to design and program and create, in some cases, high, low, and medium tech systems. We have to update and train staff on how to use the AAC systems. And honestly, and parents, we have to do parents too. And honestly, if you're trying to do that using a traditional schedule, you can say without a doubt that it's very difficult to do that. It's difficult to find the time to meet with the teacher. It's difficult to have time to meet with the parent. And what ends up happening is, because of lack of training, those devices get stuck on the shelf. And so, or those communication systems, even if they're low tech. So it's an extremely important indirect activity that we need to be able to have the time to do. We can help with curriculum modifications, provide staff development. And one of the staff developments that you can provide is all the services that you can provide and the role of the SLP. A lot of people don't have any idea about the scope of practice that we have. You know, from feeding and swallowing to OGCALM to cognitive communication issues, not to mention all the artic, language, fluency, social communication, and voice that we do. We just have such a broad scope of practice. A lot of times people don't understand that we do a whole lot more than just working on S's and R's. So those are some of the things that you can do as indirect services for your students. Now, when do I do all of the indirect activities using a traditional schedule? Well, trust me, it's very difficult to do. That's the reason we're suggesting that you try to move to the 3-to-1 model. If you don't have that flexibility in your scheduling, you don't have the time to make all of those things happen that contribute to the generalization of the skills for the student. And that generalization piece, that carryover piece, you guys know has been very hard to be able to achieve without being able to do the indirect pieces. When you're beginning to do the model, make sure, go to full screen. When I do that, it switches. I will try to make it bigger. Okay. What you don't want to do when you first start doing this model is go in and tell people that you're going to have a week off, because it's far from that. You're going to provide direct services for 3 weeks, and then that third week you're going to be doing collaboration, consultations. You're going to be doing preparation of materials for the student, for the classroom. You're going to be consulting with the classroom teachers and related service providers to make sure everyone's on the same page for what the student needs. And don't leave your indirect weekly schedule blank. If people go by and see that you have a blank weekly schedule, honestly, you guys know what's happened in the past. There unfortunately have been people who have gone to get their nails done during school time, or have gone to get their hair cut during school time. And the assumption, unfortunately, is going to be, if you don't have things in that indirect week, that you are not providing services to students. And that's just a stigma that goes along with being an itinerant, unfortunately. But by having that indirect weekly schedule completed and filled out with time blocks, that's going to let them know that you do have anticipated ways to spend your time during that week. Now, these sample schedules, I'm going to go ahead and pull these up because they're harder to see on this slide. So give me 1 second and I will pull these up.
And Leanne, you have lots of questions.
Okay. Well, let's get through this real quickly then. And I do want to show you, I'm going to skip some of these schedules because we'll send you copies of these along with the PowerPoint. But I do want to show you that they have, it's important to have your flexible schedule listed on here. And let me show you one that's a little bit more specific. And then we'll get to questions. Okay, so with this one, you can see that we have blocks scheduled. So times set aside for Medicaid billing, time for doing STEPS, the STEPS program, AAC device programming, IEP prep, preschool teacher conferences, and teacher conferences and observations. There are all kinds of times that you're doing things, and you're actually doing them because you have all these things to do. But there's just time blocks for you to do them. And if you have a student who is not a good candidate for the 3-to-1 model, and you need to put their time on that indirect weekly schedule, then you need to do that. So you can see I have John Bon Jovi and Tim McGraw both need therapy sessions during that indirect week. So I will go over, I will send these to you and make sure that you have copies of them. I'm going to skip ahead then so we can get to the questions. I do want to go over this piece about the federal monitoring, federal programs monitoring. When people first started using the 3-to-1 model, there were some misunderstandings when the Federal Office of Federal Programs went in to do monitoring. And so I want to explain to you what they're looking for. When they go in to monitor a school, they are going to ask for your schedule. They just want your regularly planned schedule, the way it is in your, in your head. Is everything was perfect and everything went the way it was supposed to be. This is what your schedule is going to be. They don't want notes on them about absences and makeup sessions. Just think of a teacher who has their lesson plans approved. The principal looks at them before they ever have the lesson, and that's what they grade them on. Well, it's the same thing here. They just want to see what your planned schedule is. And what they're going to do is compare your planned schedule to the schedule, the number of minutes the student has on their IEP, and those need to match. So, and they'll look for your indirect minutes and your direct minutes. So make sure those are on there, and you'll show them their schedules as if everything is perfect. It's suggested that you have 2 different schedules. Some counties figured out a way. Berkeley County figured out a way to have 1 schedule. And I think possibly Raleigh County did too. But honestly, to keep it separate and to keep it straight and to make sure that you have your proper times listed in there, it's easier if you do your regular direct weekly schedule the way you've always done it. Your daily, this is what I'm doing every, half hour of the day, or however you choose to schedule your students. And then have a separate schedule just for your indirect week. When they want your indirect schedule, they just want to see that plan that I had in place, just like I showed you, that had the color blocks on it. It doesn't mean that that's absolutely what's going to happen that week, that they're there, because you never know if you're going to have an IEP meeting, those kinds of things that pop up. But what they want to see is what is your plan. So it's just easier in a lot of cases to have those 2 separate schedules. And just remember that indirect schedule doesn't have to change every week. You can keep notes on your logs about what you're actually doing during those times, but that schedule can stay the same unless you have to make changes. If a student's seen for 4 weeks and they're not a candidate for 3-to-1 model, make sure they go on that indirect week. And this is what I talked about. If you schedule them for 20 minutes, indirect services per month, then you would just break it up on that indirect week and put the student's name or initials and let them know what that stands for. You would put 5 minutes a week on your indirect schedule for that student who gets 20 minutes a month. Let's see, I'm going to skip through some of this and go on to questions and concerns. There's also a list on the PowerPoint of some SLPs who are currently using this, lead SLPs, and their counties that they're in case you want to contact them to see how things have been going with them. So Libby, if you will go ahead and share the questions with me, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, do you want me to put it on the screen, or do you want to, there's a lot of them.
Okay, let's see if we can quit sharing here. You can go ahead and upload them to the screen. That's fine. And if I don't get all of your questions answered today, we can try to respond to them and send that response along to with the PowerPoint that we'll email to you. Okay. What information do we have for homebound students? As far as I understand, homebound students may be seen virtually. They may be seen face-to-face. Depends on your individual situation. And there's some more information on the Department of Ed website under the COVID-19 information, reentry information from the Office of Special Education. And you can find some more information there. But just remember, it's an individual basis, because some students are just going to be too medically fragile for you to go in the home. Some may require virtual services. Will we need to change our IEPs? Yes, you will need to change your IEPs if you're going to be using the 3-to-1 model. But I would suggest, and this is just a suggestion, it's not, I'm telling you to do it or anything like that, but as we get back into the face-to-face situation, or whatever situation we're in when school begins, we're going to have to be thinking about some what we're calling COVID-19 recovery services. And that's different from compensatory services. There's a booklet, a little pamphlet on the website too, that talks about those services. And those are the services you're going to need to get the student back up to where they're going to be. And the suggestion is that you don't do that for like the first 30 days or so of school, just to see how much recovery and recoupment they can have. So you're going to probably be having to do some IEP meetings anyway, and that is going to be a good time to address those issues. So just listen to your county special education director and what their plan is for doing IEPs, because honestly, everybody's doing them differently. And it is your special education director's decision that you should follow. So we can put total minutes per month and not say how many per week. Yes, that's been the suggestion for quite a while, to do minutes per month, because that gives you flexibility as well. Yes, you can definitely fit the services into that month instead of just having it per week. When you have it per week, you don't have much leeway to make up those services except during that week, because you can't pull them out more the next week than their IEP says. So yes, definitely minutes per month. Some of you who probably read ASHA, most of you probably read ASHA or other organizations' information, they recommend yearly. To do services yearly. But if you think about the amount of documentation you'd have to do to keep track of that, I think it'd be very stressing and time consuming. Plus our online IEP program won't handle yearly services. We may be responsible for making up time lost from last year. That's going to be something that your county special education director will be talking with you about. But I think it would be wise to go ahead and look at the information on, I think the pamphlet's called COVID-19. No, it's called COVID-19 recovery services versus compensatory services. And that'll let you know how things are looking and the way they're going to be considered. There are suggestions on what needs to be considered during that time. I can tell you, you will not be making up any time minute by minute or session by session, because that wasn't required from the Office of Special Education Programs. And that is unless you didn't provide any service whatsoever during the whole spring. So talk to your special education director and get that guidance from them. Should have changed last week to indirect GEE. If you're going to try to use that model, Denise, that would probably be a good way to go. But if it's for an articulation student, for instance, you may not need the whole 30 minutes for that indirect. Your caseload would be the same week. It doesn't have to be. You can base it on the month. Like, there's some people who say they do the last of the month, and that makes sense because they can do their Medicaid billing. But, if you think about November and December, then you would lose your indirect month that week. And so those months. So those might be months that you want to intersperse those days throughout the month, so you can get those services in. And understand how important indirect services can be working in the schools, but are parents likely to be okay with that reduction in direct minutes? Honestly, every county who's gone to that has reported that they haven't had any issues with it. And with that, it's because they've been, telling the parents, you already know that I have to cancel services sometimes because I have to go to IP meetings or do testing and that kind of thing. And with this schedule, I hopefully won't be having to cancel services at all. We'll be able to see your child every time I'm supposed to. And I'll also be able to collaborate with the classroom teacher and other service providers to make sure that we can get that carryover that we need to get. And normally that has not been a problem. So I think it's 2:00 now. So we're going to go ahead and Libby, just keep track of those questions. We'll answer them in written form, and what you guys can do as soon as you receive them and in the email, you can just respond back to me if you have questions after we've provided the responses. Libby, if you could go ahead and post in the chat box the link for the survey. Everybody make sure you do that survey if you want credit for this, because we've got to have your name on that survey and on that certificate to show that you completed it. I'm also showing you the QR code. You can do it that way, and the link is here. Just remember that the survey has to be completed by 5 o'clock today. I apologize for all the technical issues. As we try these things for the first time, we find out things that we need to change for the next time. And like I said, we will be providing more information available on the 3-to-1 model. And as we get new resources, we'll let you know. Thank you for your patience and your questions and your interest in this model. And I'm not sure when we will have the email addresses to be able to send out your link to that. We'll send you the link to the video, to the and we'll give you a copy of the PowerPoint, to the schedules, schedule templates I was showing you, and to the questions document. So just be sure and look for that probably next week. So enjoy the rest of your summer. Take a deep breath. We're going to be able to get through this together. And I think if you are able to switch to this model, it's going to make things a lot easier for you as far as being flexible in scheduling your students, no matter how you're providing their service. So thank you very much, as always, and take care.